The People Survey is interesting because you're looking at questions of basic true-false, kind of factual nature. Did we find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? These are very simple questions with very simple answers. And what the survey found was that the more likely you were to watch Fox News Channel, the more likely you were to have completely incorrect assumptions about these things.
All the research shows a very high correlation, in the case of Fox News, with people watching it, with having a very confused notion of the world on one hand, especially of foreign policy in the Middle East, and also being strongly supportive of the government in power. And this is an extraordinarily disturbing trend for the media. I mean, for any self-respecting journalist, if you're told the more people consume your media, the less they'll know about the subject and the more they'll support government policy. And that's exactly the worst thing any journalist would ever want to hear, or should want to hear.
In terms of Fox overall, I think we have got to appreciate, and when we look at them, is to understand that this is an adjunct of the Republican Party.
What Fox specializes in is punditry, basically getting marching orders from the Republican National Committee or some political operative, and then having people pontificate about it, have guests come on and talk about it, have pseudo-experts come on and discuss it.
Their main allegiances, I'm talking about the people at the top, is to the Republican Party.
Murdoch is absolutely to his core a partisan, and he makes no secret about that.
George W. Bush sat for an interview in Austin with Fox News Channel's Carl Cameron, who joins us now with highlights. Hello, Carl.
Hi, Brett. Well,
it was well known in the summer of 2000 that Fox's lead political correspondent covering the Bush campaign, that his wife was campaigning for Bush.
Bush does have a halo. Okay. Tell me when you're ready, guys.
Things are good. Your family?
Very well. My wife has been hanging out with your sister.
Yeah, good. My county?
Laura's been all over the state campaigning, and Paulina's been constantly with her.
Yeah, Laura's a good person.
She's been terrific. I mean, to hear Pauline tell it, when she first started campaigning for you, she was a little bit nervous. Yeah. But now she's up there.
Getting her stride?
She doesn't need notes. She's going to crowds, and she's got the whole riff down.
She's a good soul.
She's having fun, too.
She's a really good soul.
And in any other news organization, in fact, in CNN that very summer, there was a producer whose husband was a lawyer for the Gore team. And this was a producer who would have naturally covered Gore, who was immediately told you're not to have anything to do with campaign coverage, either covering Bush or covering Gore, because of the possible conflict of interest or the perception of a conflict of interest. At Fox, they didn't care. The fact that the senior political reporter, his wife, is actually campaigning for the Bush campaign at a time when this guy's covering them, that didn't even register. It never would have occurred.
All right, you guys ready? All right.
That's great.
Here we go, Governor. See, the little things that get disclosed.
I like that.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Carl. It's good to see you again.
Just a few days away from the convention.
That's the lack of having some sort of basic journalistic integrity that is just missing from that organization.
First person who made the call to say that George W. Bush had been elected President of the United States was the person who was in charge of Fox News's election analysis division, the people that crunch the exit polling numbers. That person was a gentleman named John Ellis, and he is George W. Bush's first cousin. At around 2 a.m. on election night, a new set of data had come in, and it was complex data from precincts all over Florida. The proper answer in analyzing that data unquestionably was you couldn't tell. It was too close to call. There was simply no clear winner. Instead, John Ellis called it as a clear win for George Bush. Fox News then interrupted its ongoing election coverage and announced that George Bush had been elected President of the United States.
Fox News now projects George W. Bush the winner in Florida, and thus it appears the winner of the presidency of the United States.
Now, what's significant about that is not the intervention of the president's cousin to declare his relative the new president of the United States. It was the fact that within minutes, ABC, NBC, CBS also fell right in line, calling Bush as the winner.
George Bush is the president-elect of the United States.
Bush wins.
ABC News is now going to project that Florida goes to Mr. Bush.
There's no way that they could have crunched the data in that time to come to that conclusion. In fact, quite the opposite. They should have come to the conclusion which the Associated Press came to, which was that you couldn't make a call. When Fox made the call that Bush had won and the other networks followed on, that created the perception that Bush was the winner. In fact, he wasn't. But that perception was what really held for the next 37 days. And I would suggest to you that that call on election night had more to do with making George Bush president than any recount or ballot design issue.
We gave our audience bad information. Our lengthy and critical self-examination shows that we let our viewers down. I apologize for making those bad projections that night. It will not happen again.
In the old Soviet Union, you used to hear about the party line shifting 180 degrees. Watching Fox News at the end of Clinton, where it was all attack mode, where they were just vicious watchdogs. And then Bush takes power, and they're like little lapdogs. It was like night and day, and it's a party line shift.
The president has the direction and the vision to take us into the future boldly and with courage and with optimism.
He is an extraordinarily straightforward leader. He says what he's going to do and he does it.
The president stands for steady leadership during a time of enormous change and challenge.
But the president is on Air Force One and the plane has now touched down in New Mexico.
This is as strong a pro-national security conservative president as I've ever seen.
This is a guy who says what he means and means what he says.
But the president is a gentleman. You know, he set a different tone for his campaign.
Tuesday lived up to its word. And this was a super night for our candidate, John Kerry, and a super night for the Democratic Party. He's a super nominee.
I believe that in 2004, one united Democratic Party, we can and we will win this election.
What would you say would be Senator Kerry's one or two major weak points that could be exploited?
The presidential hopeful has missed every one of the 22 roll call votes in the Senate this year, but hasn't missed a paycheck.
He talks about trying to protect the taxpayers every single day, and here he is fleecing the taxpayers out of $150,000 a year.
So do you think he should step down, Dominic, when he's running for president?
The controversy over John Kerry and his Vietnam War medals has just gotten worse. He says he never suggested he threw them away, but the videotape does not lie.
Ribbons or medals? Which did John Kerry throw away after he returned from Vietnam? His perceived disrespect for the military could be more damaging to the candidate than questions about his actions in uniform.
Many are angry over Kerry's post-war protests.
But the bigger issue here is Kerry's involvement in a group that's inherently violent.
Presumptive Democratic nominee John Kerry was scaring old people, as usual, with the predictable Democratic line. He said President Bush will cut off their entitlement checks. It isn't true, but the lie has worked well for Democrats in the past.
Assuming that the unthinkable happens and that Senator Kerry becomes president.
You're watching Fox News, real journalism, fair and balanced.
They will give you almost the full Bush stump speech, no matter where it is, and no matter how many times they've shown it. Go cut live to these campaign rallies as if there was going to be real news in them, as if Bush was going to say anything earth-shattering.
And your ability to make good decisions, like marrying your wife, Carolyn.
Fox portrays his every action as a heroic move, as something dramatic and significant. I imagine it's pretty hard for the Fox producers. Some days George Bush doesn't do anything interesting, and yet they've got to find something that makes him heroic that day.
Most people just started waking up and saying, oh, you mean we don't have the fairness doctrine anymore?